My name is Alexis Lerner. I'm an assistant professor of political science at the United States Naval Academy, and I work on conflict in the post-Soviet region. And for the purpose of your project, I work on education and Holocaust education in the United States and Canada, and looking at the relationship between Holocaust education, genocide education, and intolerance and anti-Semitism.
Thank you. And could you please tell us more about your work with Liberation 75?
Sure. I got hired by Liberation 75 in 2020, right before the COVID-19 pandemic, to develop a survey that we would use to not only assess the effectiveness of Liberation 75's two-day educational treatment, which was back in 2020 intended to be in person. By 2021, when it actually happened, it was online. But it was also intended to look at what students were coming in knowing. So what do they know about the Holocaust? What do they know about anti-Semitism? Do they know who Jews are? What do they think about intolerance and anti-Semitism? So it had an evaluative role and also sort of just a analytical role.
All right. And in your view, can video games play a role in addressing society's collective memory of certain events?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Of those surveyed, I believe it was something like 11% of respondents reported learning about the Holocaust outside of the classroom, specifically through video games, where, for example, the enemy that you're trying to kill is a Nazi or something. So those sort of ways that they had heard before these words. Keep in mind, a lot of the people that we were interviewing were 12, 13, 14 years old, maybe 11, so younger.
Do you think video games can be a useful tool in fighting back against online hate, anti-Semitism, and Holocaust distortion and denial?
I don't know. I'd love to hear if that's possible when you're done with your study. I haven't seen it done. I believe that it can be done. I think one of the issues is that the target demographic for people who, at least in the United States, use video games, perhaps, are looking for more violence, more aggression. And so using it to teach about tolerance seems complicated, because, for example, are you saving a group of people? And then does it imply that they need saving? What is the implication there? I have used video games in the classroom, particularly regarding the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and I've found that to be really effective for my college-aged undergraduate students. So I think it's possible, but are these video games assigned by teachers? Or are they things that young people seek out on their own? And I think that obviously the more effective version is if young people seek it out on their own. But I haven't seen it, and so I'd love to see it done.
Yes, there is a couple of educative serious video games on the market, and they are being assigned by teachers in classrooms. Mm-hmm. But indeed, there is a need for research to see how effective these video games are, if they are effective, or if can they be more effective if the students seek it out just by themselves. And this will actually lead me to my next question. Genocide education is not yet a curricular requirement in most countries. And on your website, it's written that while some teachers introduce Holocaust education through history or literature, many students first encounter the Holocaust and other state-sanctioned and systematic mass murders through non-traditional sources. For example, comic books, social media accounts, video games, and TV shows. So I have a couple of questions related to this sentence. First of all, share your experience on how you learned about the Holocaust. What was your first encounter?
As a Jewish person of Hungarian descent, I learned about it. All four of my grandparents were survivors, and so it was a fairly normal topic of conversation in our home. Mm-hmm. My mother was working, and so I was largely raised by a grandparent, and her friends were all survivors. So it was just a normal part of life, talking about it. I think this was an experience a lot of Jewish people in the diaspora have had, where they learn about it at home. But of course, I also learned about it in school, I believe in seventh grade, maybe eighth grade. I understand that students are now learning about it at a younger age. And um, and then I suppose not again until graduate school. So sort of interspersed in these like curricular blocks, but mostly at home.
Thank you. You are also teaching about Holocaust, or at least some of your lessons are touching on this topic as well. Could you please talk about your course called Jews by the Number and how it approached the niche topic like the Holocaust and addressed maybe contemporary antisemitism, or just in general how to research Jews by the number?
Right. So I teach a course. I originally taught it at the University of Toronto for several years, and I adapted it for the United States military more recently. And what we do is we look at how, traditionally these data sets, Arleston Archives in Bad Arleston, Germany, or even the Shoah Foundation's Visual History Archive out of California, et cetera, these bodies of information were traditionally used to help, families find out what happened to their relatives, or to help survivors request financial reparations from various governments, the Hungarian government, the German government. Today, that's not necessarily the use of these archives. And so I was thinking a lot, maybe 7 years ago, on how we could use these archives to moving forward for pedagogy, for education. And maybe it's the same in Europe, but certainly here there's a big turn toward a numerate way of thinking, sort of a data science way of thinking. And so this is the course. It's a data science course for students of Jewish studies. And we do the traditional statistics and computer science stuff, talking about descriptive statistics, talking about deception, talking about correlation, causation, regression, etc. I teach Tableau, which is one kind of software to illustrate, data sets. But students are welcome to use Python or if they so choose. But then all of the data sets that we work with are relevant for Jewish studies. So as you say, some of them are about anti-Semitism. We look at the Anti-Defamation League's Global 100 survey of anti-Semitism in the world. This week, for example, tomorrow we're going to be doing Hughes' survey of Jewish Americans. We looked at Ron Unz's critiques of Jewish enrollment in the Ivy Leagues and in the instances of anti-Semitism in his own explanations. But we also rely heavily on Holocaust data. And so we look at the Arleston archives in depth, and we look at, the Fortunoff archives at Yale, and we look at the Haim archives at Indiana University, and we look at all these different data sets, but we also work heavily with the Shoah Foundation's data. And so each student is assigned one testimony. They code that, we come up with a code book. We learn about operationalizing information, and we code that testimony. For example, what experiences this person have when they comment on, Red Army, what emotion are they having, and so on. And they're very thoughtful about the code. And then we download the whole data set. Every year I ask permission of the students. So the data goes from 20 to 40 to 60 to 80 observations. And they use those observations to come to some kind of conclusion about the Holocaust. When women give their testimonies, are they more likely to hesitate, to have these long pauses as they work through emotionally different material? When someone lived through a concentration camp, were they less likely to practice Judaism after the war when they were very religious before the war? So on. These are questions the students ask. So of course, they're not doing groundbreaking research all the time. It's more for learning about how you can look at archives and observational data through a numerate lens.
That sounds super useful. A bit scary because of the numbers, but I guess your students are less scared of the numbers.
No, I always have students who are, the reason I actually originally created this course is a Jewish studies department came to me and said, we have students who are, their major in college is Jewish studies. And because of the university requirement, they have to take a math class. And so because we don't offer math, they have to go to forestry or astronomy or something. And they have to go elsewhere to learn about math. And so they wanted to create an in-house, an in-department math course that these students could take. And so this is why I created it. It was specifically, I have a lot of students I do have students who are economics or computer science or cyber science or data science students, but I also have many students who are English, history, Arabic, Chinese, like they study those languages, or they'll study Russian, or political science. So I have a lot of students who are not from the sciences at all. And one of the things that we talk about extensively throughout the course is the ethics of doing this. Taking this experience of mass atrocity where people were reduced to, removed of their human nature and reduced to numbers, and then put in a data set and reapply the numbers. I mean, that seems really problematic. So thinking about how we can do this really ethically and thoughtfully, we do a lot of thinking about that too.
That's great. There is another course you have been involved in 2016. You have also taught about data literacy and shared your pedagogical experiences with the Holocaust Geographic Collaborative, if I found the right information. And here students could apply their geographical questions and spatial methods to historical research. Could you please share your experiences about this program as well?
It was more recently. I think I spoke at the Holocaust Geographies Collective in January 2021, maybe. And really what I spoke to them about was essentially what I said to you here is, and I have this article with Andrew Gelman, who's a statistician at the Columbia University. And we look at how you can, teach students who are afraid of the numbers, how you can use these sort of methods to teach them about these experiences and also give them that data literacy. And one of the things I talked about at the Holocaust Geographies Collective, and one of the things we talk about in our article, and something I'm very, I think is very important, is that in the media, at least in the United States, we have a lot of headlines that are, very sexy. Millennials never heard of Auschwitz, whatever. And so one of the important takeaways from this course that I teach is that I want students to go, okay, but show me the data. Like, let's look at how these questions were asked and really unpack it so that they can evaluate the legitimacy of that claim and see if it's just a sexy headline or if it's actually really a problem. And 9 times out of 10, it's just a sexy headline.
And my next question is about the importance of these classes and the importance of dissemination of memory in the teaching of history and preserving historical memory, because it has become very important in the last, let's say, last decade due to the populist surge all over the world. And there is a pressing demand to remember how authoritarian regimes came about and how they were overcome. What do you think can be done to bring the message never again more effectively close to students, other than through university courses or, well, maybe video games? But I don't know, do you have any other method to suggest how to bring this message closer to the new generation?
I guess I have 2 answers. First of all, the data shows that people respond to emotional experiences. And so this is one of the reasons why, until this point, actually hearing from survivors was really effective. And as these survivors are no longer alive, it becomes a major question of how do we continue to build that emotional reaction and that emotional connection to the material. And so one of the solutions is, the Shoah Foundation has their eyewitness program, which is, I guess, kind of a version of video games. The idea that it uses AI and you can ask it questions and the person responds, like 1,000 cameras on a survivor on a stage, and it's a hologram that you can interact with. And so there's that. So some of the approaches like that I think are really effective. I mean, I think the other thing, and this is something we're doing in Ontario schools, is that it can't just be a one-off, like a March is the month to study this thing. It has to be something more integrated into the curriculum. And as a political scientist, I think that it's a great way to teach about other smaller things. When we're talking about coups, we can talk about Hitler. When we talk about fascism, we can talk about Nazi Germany. When we talk about what does it mean to be a democracy? What is the rally around the flag effect? What are these actual ideas, and how can we use those examples to reinforce those ideas rather than just make it like a unit on the Holocaust? So integrating it better throughout a curriculum, I think, is also really helpful. So emotional reaction, emotional, connections, interpersonal connections, and then also integrating in the curriculum.
Oh, that sounds very great, especially because I think in this, we kind of live in a post-truth era, and it has become crucial for educators to use reliable and plausible sources and perceptive evidentiary accounts. And as you mentioned, for example, testimony from survivors was one of such sources. To contest interpretations of certain groups. For example, the far right has a different interpretation of the past than other people, to put it this way. How do you think we can prevent contested interpretations from becoming the dominant interpretation?
We have to supplement what young people are seeing in their soccer clubs and on their social media platforms. We have to supplement it with fact-based learning in the classroom. And so that's something that Liberation 75 and I have been working really hard on is making policy changes so that in the classroom, they're getting a foundational knowledge that they can use to evaluate. When they see something online, is it credible? Is it not? Maybe they're not sure and they want to look more into it. And they know where to find credible sources to validate it. So I think just fighting disinformation with education is one good way to do it.
It's actually connected to my next question because I wanted to talk about the gaming community. I think young people who spend a lot of time online, even if they are not spending their time by gaming, they also can spend their time on gaming adjacent platforms, for example, Twitch, Steam, Discord, etc. And recent studies found that some of these platforms are actually heavily populated by far-right groups, and the youth who are active there, they are kind of vulnerable for radicalization. Do you view the gaming community as a community which is vulnerable for the influence of the far right in general, and for youth radicalization as well? And what do you think we can do to fight online hate and online antisemitism and Holocaust denial and distortion? How we can prevent that young students who spend their time on these platforms, they don't adopt these ideas, especially far-right view on Holocaust?
I mean, to answer your first question, I really am not an expert on gaming platforms, but surely when people are able to hide behind fake names and stuff, maybe a lot of these are kids saying these things. However, they learn it at home, so they're responding to something. But to answer this other question of how do we fight it, we have to keep the corporations responsible and accountable. When Twitter lets anti-Semitism occur, extremist rhetoric occur, that's arguably hate speech, that needs to be stopped. And so there has to be some accountability. And if the organizations are not going to be accountable, then we have to not use them. So there has to be, Facebook has to be able to target these far-right private groups and whatnot. I mean, that's the answer. We have to hold these organizations accountable.
Another contemporary problem is the domination of fake news and disinformation, and it can affect historical facts as well. Did your courses, any of them touched on it, how to filter out information? Like, for example, how do you differentiate between fake news and real information, how to spot real data, and how you can double check different methodologies behind research data?
I mean, that's all we do in my data science course, right? So we're constantly unpacking it. When we see a headline that says Jews are overrepresented in the Ivy League and it's not proportionate to their educational levels or their prowess or whatever, we look at the data and we're like, okay, well, where is he coming up with this idea? How is he measuring these terms? How does he identify intellectual prowess? How is he measuring the Jewish community? How is he looking at these ideas? And so that is essentially what we're doing in my data science course. So, I can only impact like 16 kids at a time, but that's why Andrew and I wrote the article, is so that theoretically other people could see how we do it and model that in their own institutions.
In some European countries, for example, especially the former collaborationist countries, like countries from Central Europe, Italy, Serbia, or even Austria, there is a unique approach to deal with deal with the memory of Holocaust, with the increasing power of nationalist populist forces in these countries that coincides with cultural policies aimed at downplaying or denying the role of these nations in the Holocaust. The memory of the Holocaust is often twisted and instrumentalized or distorted following certain political parties' interests. And do you have any advice to teachers on how to teach about mass strategies in an environment where teachers are forced to rely on history books or educational, they are forced to use educational tools which were created by the government, which is in this case tries to distort the Holocaust?
It's a great question. I think it's a really hard question because I know that the reality is not just that they have state curriculum and state textbooks, but also that maybe for teaching something very critical of the Polish or Hungarian state, they could get in trouble, even though that's kind of a distortion of facts. So one of the things that they can do is they can rely on a primary document. For example, in the Arleston archives, it's got, 55 million pages of primary documents, including documents that point to the Hungarian government and the arrow cross as uniquely uniquely complicit in the Holocaust. And the same with Poland. I mean, looking at these original materials, I think that I don't think you can fight against original materials. It's perhaps the Hungarian government can say, well, the Shoah Foundation is American, and it's, I don't know, George Soros or something, and he's trying to create this idea about Hungarian complicity. But you look at Bad Arleston, and it is what it is. It's original document, evidence of persecution, evidence of intentional persecution. So I would point them to the original materials, and organizations like the Arleston Archives are doing a lot of great work, creating sort of these little curricular tools for teachers to use in the classroom or outside the classroom. They could bring them to sites. I think that's very useful. I had a lot of family from Munkach, which is now Ukraine, but used to be, I guess it's now Mukachevo, but it used to be Munkach. And when you go to Munkach, you can see the places where people were brought before they were sent to Auschwitz. I mean, it's not like, it's not a mystery. You go to Łódź, you can see the square with where the ghetto was. Like, it's not, so field trips perhaps to see these places in real time, if it's plausible.
Although some of these like trips or digitalization of archives can take resources, and if the state denies funding,
of course. But I think Arleston is free. I think it's free for everybody, and also there's always like ways to get access to some of these organizations for free. Especially in places like Poland and Hungary and even Serbia, where the access to original materials on this particular topic are very limited. I think there are organizations willing to help.
Yes.
And unfortunately, maybe it is open society, and that's why Orban hates it or something. But
yeah, actually, we thought about video games because, for example, for students who are like in the classroom, they can't learn about Holocaust, or at least they can't fully learn about the history behind how it came about, what led to the whole World War, and etc. They learn about stereotypes about the Jews and about the Second World War and Holocaust from TV shows, movies, or video games. We just wanted to focus on video games specifically because I feel like after a long day, people, especially young people, they prefer to either go on a streaming service or video games.
Maybe it's possible to integrate whatever video games you develop with some of the resources, for example, like the Eyewitness program, and thinking about how those holograms can be integrated into video games so that like kids can kind of get that like firsthand interaction, but in the comfort of their living rooms.
Yes, we made interview with some video game maker, and I also made an interview with a woman who is making tabletop games, and it sounds really immersive and fun as of course game
educational. Yeah.
Yes, let's put it that way.
If you'd like, I can try to workshop it in my class. if it's useful. You know, I can have my students do it and see how it goes and then tell you how it goes if you want.
That sounds great.
Yeah, even like a year from now, whatever. So
Oh,
I can be helpful.
you. And we have arrived to the last question, and you again helped me to connect my question after questions, because my last question is that on campuses across the globe, professors are putting historically based games, video games or tabletop games into their classroom. And I would like to ask you, which game would you personally select to raise awareness about the Holocaust, antisemitism, or online or higher hate?
So like I said, I've never seen one that's good. I've never really seen that available to me. I do some simulations in the classroom. I do like about the climate. I have like a UN climate summit about carbon emissions. But in terms of games, I have had them play this game about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I'm trying to remember what it's called because it was very good, but I think it's not even available anymore.
Oh.
Peacemaker.
Mm.
And so Peacemaker was good. I mean, I think that it helped people see how difficult it was to achieve peace. My students always liked it. They always enjoyed playing. So I think something that keeps their attention. It was, I remember one issue with Peacemaker, it was a bit slow. So there's that. One of the good things about Peacemaker is that it was something that they could play on their own, or we could play as a class, and they could vote on how they wanted to, you know, do you want to do this or this or this? And they could vote, and then it would tally their votes, and we could kind of do it together. So that was very cool too. So something that can be played at home, or you know, against a computer, or maybe in the classroom against each other. That was very cool.
Great. And we have arrived to the end of our interview. Thank you very much for dedicating time for me and for our institution.
No problem. It was my pleasure.